My name is Raisa. I have worked for years in the mansion of my master, a once feared landlord of our village. Over time, I had seen many strange things within those high walls, but nothing as bizarre as what I accidentally overheard that afternoon. I was sweeping near the main hallway when I caught the voice of the village cleric speaking to my master. His words made me freeze. He was talking about a halala, not with one man, but two. At first, I thought I had misunderstood. My ears must have played a trick, but then I heard it again, clearly, calmly. The cleric told my master that the only solution to bring his wife back after divorce was for her to marry not one but two men. I was shocked. I had never heard of such a thing. Was this even allowed in our religion, or had the cleric gone mad? Curiosity gripped me. After the cleric left, I decided to follow him discreetly, hoping to question him privately about what I had just heard. But to my surprise, he didn't leave the mansion. Instead, he turned a corner and stopped in a secluded area near the garden. That's when something even stranger happened. My mistress, who had not stepped out of her room for days due to her waiting period, appeared before him wrapped entirely in a black veil. Their meeting was short. A few whispered words, a quiet nod, and the cleric left as if nothing had happened. The mistress turned back toward her room, disappearing the same way she had come, silent and hidden. The entire scene unsettled me deeply. What could be so urgent, so secretive, that she would break the customs of her mourning period to speak with him? Back inside, the master seemed visibly disturbed. He looked like a man grappling with an impossible decision. The cleric had left no room for alternatives. If the master wanted his wife back, this halala was the only way, and it had to be done through not one but two men. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind swirled with questions. Why two men? What kind of divorce required such a step? Why were the master and mistress behaving so oddly? None of it made sense. But I was determined to find out. Something was terribly wrong in that house, and I had a feeling it was just the beginning. The next 2 days passed in a heavy silence that lingered in every corner of the mansion. Neither the master nor the mistress spoke to anyone. The other servants avoided their quarters altogether. Only I, bound by duty and years of loyalty, continued to serve them, observing their strange behavior with growing unease. The master, once a towering figure of authority, now sat slumped in his chair, lost in thought. He barely touched his food and stared blankly at the floor as if searching for answers that refused to reveal themselves. On the evening of the second day, he summoned the cleric once again. I lingered nearby, pretending to dust a shelf, my ears tuned to their conversation. "I'm ready," the master said, his voice breaking. "Arrange the halala, with the two men you mentioned." My heart sank. He was going through with it. The cleric nodded, but even he seemed slightly uncomfortable. "It must be kept absolutely confidential," he reminded. "No one outside this household must know." The master agreed without hesitation. "Choose whomever you trust, but do it quickly. I can't bear this waiting." Later that night, I overheard the names. My blood ran cold. The cleric had chosen the two newest servants, men who had recently arrived at the Haveli and who seemed to always hover near the mistress. I had never trusted them. They barely worked, always making excuses to stay near her, and now they would be the ones involved in this bizarre ritual? The master appeared oddly calm after hearing the names. Perhaps because he believed they were his loyal workers, men he could control? He must have thought that if he ever demanded a divorce from them, they would obey without question. And perhaps he was right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was at play. I was sure the mistress would reject the idea, that she would scream, cry, refuse to be part of such an arrangement. But when I delivered the message to her, carefully, gently, she didn't react at all. No surprise, no anger. She simply stared at me, her eyes unreadable. There was something about the way she looked at me that made my skin crawl, as if she knew far more than anyone realized. That night, the mansion prepared for a secret ceremony. And as the air grew colder, so did my confidence. Something was unfolding beneath the surface, something none of us could yet understand. The air in the Haveli that night was heavy with a strange kind of tension. No music played, no lights were strung. And yet, a wedding was about to take place, a wedding no one was supposed to know about. I moved through the corridors quietly, pretending to be busy, but my mind was racing. Everything about this felt wrong. The cleric arrived just before sunset. He was ushered into a back room where the mistress waited, draped in an ornate black dress that shimmered faintly under the dim lighting. I had never seen her dressed like this, not even during her actual wedding. Her face was glowing, not with fear or hesitation, but with something closer to calm determination. It sent a chill down my spine. The two men arrived shortly after. Their faces were unreadable and their posture casual. They didn't seem nervous or reluctant. In fact, they carried themselves as though this arrangement had been long anticipated. The cleric quietly performed the ceremony. No one else was present. No blessings were said aloud, no prayers offered. Just a quick set of vows, and with that the mistress was now married to both men simultaneously. I watched everything from the shadows, my heart pounding. It felt as though I were witnessing a burial rather than a marriage. Something sacred had been twisted into something terrifying. Later that night, I saw the mistress again. She was fully adorned in gold and silk, her hair perfumed and her hands painted with henna. She looked radiant, far more than I had ever seen her with the master. With slow, graceful steps, she entered the room where both men waited. I couldn't understand it. The mistress, who had once been so reserved, so respectful of tradition, was now willingly walking into a room to spend the night with two men, strangers to her supposedly. I had expected resistance, shame, refusal. Instead, she moved with grace and confidence. Unable to suppress my worry, I brought a tray of juice to the master. He was sitting alone in his room, pale and visibly trembling. When he looked up at me, his eyes were red and hollow. "Raisa," he whispered, "tonight feels like fire on my soul. I've handed over the woman I love. How does a man survive this?" I had no answer. All I could do was sit beside him and wonder what had brought them to this point. The woman he loved had changed, and none of us knew why. Sleep was impossible that night. My thoughts raced endlessly. The image of the mistress walking confidently into that room with both men haunted me. I had never seen a woman surrender herself so completely, yet there was no sorrow on her face, no hesitation in her step. What was she hiding? The next morning, I awoke restless and decided to prepare tea early. As I walked past the corridor leading to her chamber, I paused, hoping to hear something, anything. But the silence was absolute. Not a whisper, not a creak. Eventually, I returned to my quarters, but my unease only grew. Later that day, I watched the mistress dress up again. Her beauty was radiant, perhaps even more striking than the night before. No one else in the Haveli seemed to notice anything unusual. The other servants were oblivious. Only I knew what had transpired, and it made me observe her differently. She didn't visit the master at all, not even once. He, meanwhile, lay in bed, quiet, broken, visibly older. His pride, which once commanded the respect of the entire village, was crumbling. His body had long betrayed him, but now his heart was fading too. Around noon, something strange happened. I saw the mistress leave the mansion alone, completely covered in a black veil. That had never happened before. She never stepped outside without the master's permission. But this time, she walked out with steady steps, and no one dared stop her. 2 hours passed before she returned. Her appearance was disheveled, her clothing creased, her face flushed. Just outside her room, she nearly collided with me. I instinctively asked, "Where have you been, madam?" Her expression changed in an instant, from surprise to fury. "You're a servant. Stay in your place. You don't question me." I quickly apologized and stepped back, but something had shifted. Her anger wasn't just about being questioned. It was the panic of someone who'd been caught off guard. That moment confirmed it for me. She was hiding something far bigger than the halala. I told myself I wouldn't speak to the master yet. I needed proof. He adored Herto blindly that even if I dared say something, he might turn against me. I'd seen his wrath before. No, I had to be careful. Whatever game the mistress was playing, I would uncover it. For now, I kept silent, but my mind was already devising a way to find out what was truly happening behind that closed door. That night, the master asked about her. His voice was tired, barely a whisper, as I placed his dinner before him. "Has she said anything?" "Come to ask about me?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. I hesitated and shook my head, gently replying that she hadn't left her room. His eyes dimmed even more. I could see the pain sinking deeper into him, but he tried to mask it behind a soft nod. "Tell her. I wish to see her," he added, avoiding my gaze. I carried his message, unsure how she would respond. When I entered her room, she was brushing her hair, seated before the mirror like a bride preparing for a celebration. Upon hearing my words, she simply smiled, almost playfully. Then, with great care, she chose her jewelry and her most elegant dress and made her way toward the master's room. I followed silently behind, and the moment he saw her, something inside him shattered. "You look beautiful," he said, forcing a smile. "But I know this beauty isn't for me anymore." She didn't deny it. Instead, she lowered her gaze and answered softly, "The cleric says I must stay with them for at least 40 days before I can return to you. It's part of the process." 40 days. The number echoed through the room like a thunderclap. His hands trembled, and I could see his lips quiver. She stood there calmly, a portrait of grace and control, while he crumbled inside. I turned my eyes away, unable to witness the pain etched so deeply across his face. That night, she returned to her shared room with the two men, and I retired to the servants' quarters. My husband, Bakhto, noticed my silence. He had served the household almost as long as I had. "You've been distant lately," he said as we settled in for the night. I hesitated, but then told him everything. Her sudden disappearances, the strange wedding, and the encounter at the door. Bakhto frowned. "She's hiding something. And it isn't just about those men. Let me watch her for a while. Maybe I'll learn what she's up to." I nodded. I trusted him. Deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining things. The mistress was walking a path with a purpose, and we were only seeing its shadows. What lay ahead, I couldn't guess. But Bakhto was right. Something much darker was buried beneath her silence, and it was time to uncover it. The very next evening, Bakhto returned earlier than usual. His face was tight with concern, his steps brisk. As soon as he reached our quarters, he motioned for me to come closer. "Raisa," he said in a low voice, "you were right. Something is seriously wrong." I held my breath, urging him to go on. "She left the Haveli again today," he whispered. I followed her from a distance. She went straight to the cleric's house. I blinked in disbelief. The same cleric who arranged her marriage to those two men? He nodded grimly. "Yes, and she stayed there for nearly an hour. Alone, no one else entered or left." A cold wave washed over me. That very cleric, young, unmarried, and living alone, had orchestrated the entire halala. What possible reason could she have to meet him in secret? I couldn't sleep that night. My thoughts were a whirlwind of questions and dread. The silence in the Haveli felt suffocating. Even the walls seemed to be holding back secrets. The next night, my resolve hardened. I waited until everyone had retired and then crept silently through the hallway. My heart pounded as I approached the room where the mistress now stayed with the two men. I knew it was wrong, but something inside me screamed for answers. Finding a stool, I climbed up toward the rear ventilation window, just enough to peer inside. And what I saw turned my blood cold. The mistress was with both men, not like a wife bound by unfortunate circumstances, but as if she were the one in control. I had expected resistance, maybe even misery, but she moved with calm assurance, her face devoid of shame. The two men treated her with subtle deference, not lust or dominance. They were not strangers. There was a bond between them that could not be faked. Shocked, I stepped down, my hands trembling, my world tilted. Nothing I had suspected had prepared me for what I had just witnessed. The entire arrangement was not born out of helplessness, but intention. There was a hidden narrative here, and I had merely scratched its surface. The next morning, as the sun rose over the Haveli, I found myself waiting in the corridor outside her room. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have proof, but I had seen enough to confront her. She greeted me with a smile, but there was steel behind her eyes. And that morning, I decided I would get to the truth no matter what it cost. She sat in front of the mirror, adjusting her earrings as I stepped inside the room. The same calm expression, the same poised demeanor, but this time I didn't let it distract me. "You've been acting strange," I said quietly, "and I know more than you think." She paused, her hand still near her neck. Then she slowly turned to face me. "Is that so?" she replied, her tone soft but sharp beneath its surface. "I know about the visit to the cleric," I continued, holding my ground. And last night, I saw what's happening inside that room. This isn't about Halala, is it?" Her face lost its color for a moment, but then she stood up and walked toward me. "You've been watching me?" "I had to," I answered. Something didn't feel right. Now I know for sure it isn't. She sighed deeply as if some heavy burden had just shifted on her shoulders. "If you've come this far, Raisa, then you deserve the truth. I listened in silence as she walked back to her bed and sat down, her voice steady, almost too calm for what she was about to reveal. Your master, she began, is not the man you think he is. He is the reason my sister was found dead behind the fields. She was only a teenager when it happened. She had been brutalized, left to die like an animal, and my parents. They never recovered from the loss. I gasped, but said nothing. She went on, her voice firm now. She wasn't the only one. Many young girls, some married, some not, met the same fate. The village claimed wild animals were responsible. But I discovered the truth the night I fell ill. I went to the guest house to call my husband and saw him and his friends with a girl. She looked barely alive. My knees felt weak, but I held onto the side table. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but I returned to my room in silence, too terrified to do anything. The next morning, another lifeless body was found in the fields. She paused, tears collecting in her eyes. That's when I knew I had married my sister's murderer. I could barely breathe. The room felt too small, too still. And I realized, she added, that if I couldn't punish him with the law, I would destroy him from within. Her words echoed in my ears. What she was planning wasn't revenge, it was a reckoning. And it had already begun. I stood frozen, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. Everything I had known, every word the master had ever spoken, every tear he had shed, now felt like part of a carefully constructed lie. She, the woman I once pitied, had been carrying a storm inside her all along. I was only 14 when my sister died, she continued, her eyes distant now. My parents never recovered. Soon after they passed away, I was left alone in this village. My 2 younger brothers were sent away to the city by my uncle so they could be safe. She glanced at me as if expecting judgment, but I remained silent. Years later, your master approached me for marriage. I was young and had no choice. Saying no wasn't an option. So I married him, believing that perhaps life had dealt me a new beginning. Her voice faltered briefly. And at first, it wasn't terrible. He showed me kindness. He gave me comfort. I even started to believe I had been wrong about him. But that illusion shattered the night I walked into the guest house and saw what he really was. A predator, a monster in the skin of a generous husband. I sat down slowly, unable to stand anymore. And the 2 men? The ones you married for halala? She smiled faintly. They are not strangers. They are my brothers. I called them back from the city when I decided it was time. The cleric already knew everything. He had seen the same horrors but stayed silent to protect himself. I confronted him and made him choose, help me or I'd expose it all. But the marriages, the nights, they were fake, she said quickly. The weddings were symbolic. No real intimacy, just a performance. A punishment designed for the man who thought he could use others without ever paying a price. And the 40 days? She looked directly into my eyes. He'll spend each day believing I belong to someone else. Each night will burn him like fire. And when the time comes, I won't return. I'll vanish. He'll know what it means to be powerless, to lose something he thought he owned. It was vengeance. Layered, calculated, but not without pain. Her voice didn't tremble, but I could feel the weight behind every word. She wasn't doing this out of hate alone. She was doing it for her sister, for every silent victim, and for herself. Days turned into weeks. The master withered slowly like a tree struck by lightning but left standing. He barely spoke. Most of the time he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, whispering the mistress's name under his breath. The glow in his eyes had dimmed to a cold, empty flicker. Each evening, the mistress continued her charade, dressing up, smiling faintly, and walking past his room without a glance. He waited for her, begged me to bring her to him, but she never came. She knew exactly what she was doing. He would ask questions with trembling lips. Did she ask about me? Did she say when she'll return? I would lie, say she was praying or asleep or tired. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth, that she was counting the days with quiet satisfaction. By the end of the 40th day, the master looked like a man carved out of regret. I brought him his medicine that morning, and he said in a voice so faint I could barely hear, "She'll come back today, won't she?" But when I went to her room, it was empty. Her clothes were gone, her jewelry missing. The 2 men she had married had vanished too. I rushed to check the gate. The guards said they had left early, saying they had family business in the city. No one suspected a thing. Back in her room, on her neatly made bed, lay a letter with the master's name written across it. My hands trembled as I picked it up and returned to his room. He took the envelope slowly and opened it with shaking fingers. As he read, his lips parted, but no words came, his eyes filled with tears. Then, with a soundless gasp, the letter slipped from his hands. I picked it up and read what she had written. I cannot share my life with a man who stole my sisters. I cannot be the wife of someone who preyed upon countless innocent women and then buried his guilt beneath power and silence. This was never about halala. It was about truth, about justice, about making you feel what so many others could not put into words. I hope each of these days taught you something about pain, about loss, and about the cruelty of false strength. Goodbye. The master did not speak for hours. By evening, he had collapsed entirely, bedridden, speechless, broken beyond repair. And as night fell upon the Haveli, it was as if justice itself had settled into the walls. After the mistress left, the Haveli was never the same. The once commanding presence of the master had faded into something hollow, something pitiful. He remained bedridden, barely eating, barely speaking. Only the occasional moan or distant mumble reminded us that he was still alive. His body was intact, but his mind, his spirit had been shattered. Weeks passed. The servants moved through the house like ghosts, unsure how to behave in a place that no longer had a master in control or a mistress to supervise. The power that once ruled this mansion had crumbled without a single fight, and the silence that followed was heavier than any storm. I continued to serve him, though he barely acknowledged my presence. Sometimes he would look at the window and whisper her name. Other times he would stare at his own hands like he didn't recognize them. The man who once dictated village rules, who forbade divorces, who claimed to uphold morality, was now a prisoner of his own past. Oddly, after the mistress left, no more incidents of assault were reported in the village. No girls were found in the fields. No new graves were dug in silence. It was as if her departure had lifted a curse no one had dared to name. Life resumed its routine, but whispers about her remained. The villagers didn't know the truth. They speculated. Some insulted her character. Others wondered why she left a wealthy home behind. Only the cleric and I knew what she had done, and why. Neither of us ever spoke of it aloud, not because we were protecting her, but because we were protecting something larger, the knowledge that justice, though quiet, had been delivered. In private moments, I would replay her final words. He will learn what it means to lose something he never valued, and he had. Her absence had hollowed him. Her silence had screamed louder than any confrontation. One morning, I found him weeping. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a man who finally saw his reflection for what it truly was. I sat beside him, not to comfort him, but to witness what was left of the legend he once was. He had once broken many, but now he was the one broken. Time moved on. The house remained, but its story had changed forever. And somewhere in a distant city, I imagined her living freely, perhaps smiling for the first time without fear, because, finally, the burden wasn't hers to carry anymore.